Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Jill Wendt. I am a professor here at Arizona State University. Welcome to EDP 510. This video is sent to you to help as a supplemental resource for you to understand our signature assignment for this course. It is a very fun signature assignment. It is academically rigorous, but I'm excited to be here and to explain the parts to you. What would be beneficial is as you are viewing the video, if you will go into Blackboard, there is an Erie Project tab. Click on that. And I think it's about the second file in there. It says Project Details. That's what I'm going to be using today to explain this. And so if you will have that in front of you, that might assist. If you need to pause, that's okay. That'll assist you in following me through what I'm going to talk about. This is an opportunity to think about topics you're interested in learning more about in the next 6 weeks. You're going to do a research component. You're going to do an observation and 2 interviews with teachers, which is going to be a lot of fun. And then you'll do a reflection. And finally, you'll do a roundtable with your peers. And so you really do want to either one, select a topic that you're really passionate about and you just want to add to the knowledge, or maybe you want to select a topic you don't know much about, and then you want to enhance that learning through this process. Okay? So we'll start with the first part, which is the initial reflection. I will say really quickly, APA is required, APA format for each of these 5 components. So you do want to make sure that your papers are formatted in APA style with a cover sheet, with the correct headings, and if you need help with that, please refer to your instructor for assistance with APA. If you look, the first page really talks about each part. There's 5 components, so we're going to skip to the next page, which is part 1, reflection, initial beliefs, and this explains a little bit in more depth the very first part of the signature assignment. And here, you're going to write about a 2-page paper in APA style, reflecting on your own teaching philosophy. And this is really important because if you've never been asked about your teaching philosophy, you'll find it really useful when you go on job interviews. Because a lot of times when you interview for positions, they will say, what is your teaching philosophy? And so it's helpful to have one, build on it, save it, and see how it maturates throughout the years. So in this paper, I'd like you to think about your own teaching philosophy, and then reflecting on either a couple of things that you're maybe interested in doing for this project, or if you know passionately, I want to do motivation, intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation, then you can incorporate that in as well. This is meant for you to explore your own teaching philosophy and also potential topics that you may be interested in continuing the Erie project with. In this particular paper, it is okay to write in I, which is not typical in APA. You usually write third person. Since you're reflecting on your own teaching philosophy, it is okay to say, I personally embrace diversity in the classroom, etc., and use that language, as long as it's formatted in APA. It should be 12-point font, Times New Roman, double spaced, again with a cover page. And on this first one, you really probably won't quote a published article. So if that's the case, you'd have a cover page, 2 pages of content, and then that should be it. If you do happen to reference a study, you will need to provide an in-text citation, and then you would add a references page at the end. The questions you see, there's 10 that are prompting you to think about different things to consider. What do you think are the most important sources of student engagement and learning, and etc.? Those are meant to just help your thinking, prompt your thinking. You do not have to address those 10 questions in this essay. It's just to kind of help jumpstart you into saying, oh, okay, this might be something I'm interested in, or this is something I haven't considered, or this is something I haven't written about yet. So those are just purely intended to help guide your thought process. For the part 2, the literature review. For this one, it's almost a combination of an annotated bibliography and a literature review. So for this one, please do not procrastinate. This is probably the most time-consuming piece of the Erie project because you have to go in and look for 3 peer-reviewed scholarly articles on your topic. So part 1 is due, refer to your course calendar for that. And then when you get to part 2, you really want to have landed on a particular topic, because that's the topic you're going to look at for the other ERI components. The literature review, again, you're going to select 3 scholarly articles, peer-reviewed, empirical. You will use the ASU database. The easiest way to cut down on your time for looking for articles is to go through the library website and scroll down to the bottom to frequently used resources, and it has a list of our databases. And there's 2 that I really like because they're already specific to education and psychology, and that's ERIC and PsycInfo. And so to reduce the amount of time for you looking online for articles, I would really recommend that you go into the ASU library, go to the frequently used resources, and select ERIC or PsycInfo to start looking at your term. And you may have to play around with terms. Semantics matter. And so if you do have a question, we do have a librarian that's very familiar with this project, and it's Linda Defato, DEFATO, at asu.edu. She's our ed psych librarian and knows this topic well, knows this assignment well. So she also, if you're struggling, is able to say, hey, I can assist you. She is at the Tempe campus. However, you can email her and you all can coordinate via email or phone if necessary. So for this literature review, part 2, you'll see there is a number 1, present a summary of the selected topic regarding teaching and learning, and then you're going to summarize the studies of your choice. So what was the design of the study? What was the methodology? What did it claim to support? What evidence did it support? And how does that literature connect to your own beliefs in teaching? Does the literature support your initial beliefs? If so, why? Why not? Does it challenge your initial beliefs? Why and why not? And then for each of those 3 articles, you're going to address those prompts. The format for the lit review is it's going to roughly be, students always ask and want a page requirement. It's about 6 pages without the cover page and the references page. If your articles are like a 30-page article versus a 7-page article, you may go beyond 6 pages, and that's okay. I would say that you probably couldn't cover those prompts for all 3 articles in about less than 5 to 6 pages. So that's just a rough estimate. If yours is a bit longer than that, then that's okay. You'll notice that another resource that we have provided in Blackboard is sample papers or exemplary papers, meaning students have done excellent work. There's not one provided for this literature review, and it's very purposeful. There is a variety of ways you can format your paper, and I would encourage you to do it in a way that makes sense for you. So for example, if I knew I had to do 3 articles, I might have my cover page. By the way, no abstracts are needed for this course. We don't write long enough papers for an abstract to be needed. That would be the 2nd page usually. You could just delete that page if you're using a template. And then I would start with an introduction telling the reader what you're going to read about. And then I may say Article 1 as a main heading. With APA main headings, they're bolded and center aligned. And then I may address all the prompts within that. And then do Article 2 and address the prompts. And then Article 3, address the prompts. And then a conclusion, wrapping them all together. That's one way of writing. Another way of writing is some people want their articles to be more dynamic and kind of dance together. And so if that's the case, you may use a prompt instead of the article and say, in articles, the 3 articles reviewed, and then make it more dynamic. You have to be really careful with your in-text citations to make sure that the reader can follow whose work that is if you do it in that format. So instead of Article 1, 2, 3 as main headings, you may have the prompts, design of study, and then you address all of the 3 designs within that paragraph. I would just try to think about how you want to format it in a way that's logical and meaningful to you as a learner and a student. Again, if you have any questions, you may also want to refer to your professor in case they have specific things that they would like to add on in addition to that. So with this one, you will have the cover page, the content of the 3 articles, always have an intro and a conclusion, tell the readers what they're going to read about, and then have a conclusion and wrap it all up for us. It can be just a simple paragraph. And then you will have, for this one, most definitely a references page in which you will put the references in alphabetical order on a separate page. Part 3, data collection and analysis. This is where you're going to collect some data regarding your topic. You're going to conduct at least 2 interviews with teachers. It can be, one of them can be a classmate that's in this program. The other one has to be a teacher that is working, not retired, at a school. It doesn't have to be at the school site that you're at. For flexibility purposes, we've built in that you can do these over email. We know that you're busy and you have lots of time constraints, and so if it's better for you to conduct them over email, that is fine. And then you are going to have to observe, or I'm going to say you get the opportunity, which is the gift, to observe a classroom for about 20 minutes minimum. If you want to do longer than that, that's fine. It's just more data that you're collecting. In that 20-minute observation, please let the person know the intent of the observation and that you can't be pulled in to help facilitate an activity, because then you're not truly observing what's going on. And it could be that you're just sitting in the back with a notebook. If you like the computer, you can use the computer, and you're just, it's like you're a video recording and you're taking field notes on what you see and observe, okay? Let's say you select a topic in Erie that is not observable, like parental involvement. If parental involvement, we'll just use that as an example, is your topic, you're obviously not going to be able to observe parental involvement in 20 minutes or at all, unless a parent comes in to volunteer. That's okay. You still let the data speak for itself. Do your 20-minute observation. However, make sure that when you tailor your questions to the 2 teachers that you're asking about parental involvement. There's going to be some really interesting things that'll pop out to you during the observation. It's always fun to observe and get tools to add to your toolbox as a teacher and a facilitator. And so don't worry so much about, I have to see what my topic is to be able to observe it. That's not as important. Again, if it's trauma or poverty, parental involvement, those are topics that are great to explore, and they're going to be so important in the classroom. However, you can't observe them necessarily. So don't let that deter you from doing them. Just make sure then you tweak your questions to the people that you're interviewing so that you do cover those topics. If it's parental involvement, if it's trauma, if it's poverty. And then, just as I think about poverty, please do not write anything that would identify a student or a teacher. So teacher A, teacher B is very appropriate to use. For this one, there is, a sample paper, an exemplar paper, so you can get an idea of how this student chose to write. Do notice, if you do look at that, they chose to also do a survey. They did a survey, which is completely optional, because it fit in with their schedule and they wanted to learn more and they had access. In some cases, a survey may not be appropriate depending on your topic, and then you may have to have permission. So it completely depends on the context that you're in and what your topic is. Surveys are optional, but you will see that he did conduct one. And then there's, on number 3, there's some prompts, date and time of the interview. Let your professor know if it was an email interview. Give the reader a sense of your data collection experience, okay? And then the A, B, C, D, E are things that you should cover within that paper. This is, again, a 12-inch font, Times New Roman, 1-inch margins. And for this one, there is no page limitation or minimum. The reason being is you may observe for 50 minutes, whereas your colleague may observe for 20. Or you may do 2 interviews, and the people were really long-winded that gave you lots of data, and some people may choose to interview folks that don't have as much to say about the topic. So for this, it's a very personal choice on how much you write. You do want to write about your paper using the prompts, but do not worry so much on the Erie Part 3 for a page minimum or limitation. APA is a concise way of writing, so a 20-page paper may not be appropriate for this. So just be mindful that it's a very technical style of writing. One thing I did not mention since Erie Part 1 Erie Part 1 is in first person. You can use I statements. For Erie Part 2 and 3, and 4 actually, that I'm going to cover next, we have you switch to third person. So if you're referencing yourself, you're going to say the author of this paper believes, the author of this paper found that the evidence indicated this. So you do want to make the switch to third person after Erie Part 1. Erie Part 4 is your final reflection. So you have explored your own teaching philosophy. You've identified some topics of interest. You've done a literature review. You've dug in there to see what the literature says. You have done an observation, at least one. You've conducted 2 interviews. And now in a 2-page concise paper, APA, you're going to write about this process. You're going to write about what stood out to you in this process. And again, here you have some prompts that guide you on what you should cover. For Erie Part 5, it's a round table, and depending on your instructor, they're going to set this up the way that they want to, so you would definitely want to ask about that. Sometimes our classes are very big, and sometimes they're very small, so it depends on the class size a lot for this Erie Part 5. But in Erie Part 5, it's really your time to demonstrate your knowledge about this experience with your peers. It's very meaningful. Not only do you get to talk about what you've learned through the process, but you get to hear what other people have done without doing their research. And you have so many tools to put in your toolbox regarding teaching. So it's a really exciting night. The way I set it up usually is about 5 minutes to talk about your project, and then a question and answer period so that each student has a chance to ask you questions. And then you go on to the next person. The requirement that we have for this is just a handout. You don't need to do a PowerPoint presentation or a Prezi unless your instructor says otherwise. The deliverable that you will upload into Blackboard and into TK20 for Erie Part 5 is your handout. And I will provide some samples to your instructor of the variety of handouts. That does not have to be an APA. So some people really get creative and visual and have, pictures of their topic and kids, not the kids in their study or in their classrooms, because that would require a release of information. General stock photos from online. And some just use it as bullets. And so it's intended for 2 things. One is to help guide you through talking about your topic and not leaving anything out, because you've done a lot of work at this point. You've earned the right to celebrate in what you know. And then the other thing is by giving each of your colleagues in your class or roundtable a copy of that handout so that they have something to walk away from, and it's an extra tool for their toolbox. So again, that's just a handout. You come the very last night of class and you get to kind of celebrate in the knowledge that you've gained throughout this process. Questions that I typically get, I can't think of any right now. However, please, I'm available to answer questions. Your instructor may have some more specific things that they would request, and obviously you'd want to honor that. I will say again, the most time-consuming part is the Erie Part 2, the literature review. One thing I didn't cover that you probably should ask your professor is, I usually say about an article's 10 years, going about 10 years back is okay. You may ask them for their preference. If it's a foundational article based on a theory that happened in the 70s, then maybe one of your articles dates back to 1970, but the other 2 are within the last 10 years. Please ask your instructor on what their preference is regarding that. And I think this is an awesome opportunity. It's a great project. It's meaningful. It's meant to be practical for your use. So as you do it authentically, explore what your actual beliefs are, what you'd like to learn more about, and really use this project as a way to help catapult you to the next level regarding looking at inquiry, because as teachers, inquiry is a part of our process, no matter if you've been teaching a day or 20 years. So I invite you to embrace this process. There's some APA resources that your instructor can give you if you are new to APA. Again, after Erie Part 1, you're switching to third person, even in the reflection Part 4. We want to get you used to using that third person in writing. And so the first part, we like to kind of put your feet in the pool if you haven't done APA before, but at that point forward, then you switch on to third person. One thing I do want to back up for the interviews and the observation, you may not have a reference page, but you will most certainly have an appendix. Appendix is where your field notes are going to go. So as you observe and you take notes, you're not going to regurgitate everything in the paper that you're going to pull out things that were interesting to you. But we want that data, so be sure that you say, see Appendix B for this, see Appendix A for this, and that's where you can put your field notes in. And I would highly recommend that you look at the sample paper, the exemplar paper for this, because that is a good example of where they placed it, and it made sense to them to place it that way. If it is an appendix, you'll notice it can be bullets. It doesn't have to be double-spaced like a normal part of the paper. So again, for part 1, it's unlikely that you would have references, just cover sheet and the paper. For part 2, the literature review, you're going to have the cover sheet, your content, and a references page. For part 3, you're going to have the cover page, your content, and an appendix. And then in part 4, depending on if you reference your articles, you may have a references page. You wouldn't necessarily need an appendix because you've already provided the reader with that in a prior paper. And then in part 5, it's just the handout submission. And then if you have TK20 questions, you can certainly ask your instructor. All of these will be uploaded, each component, as if it's a separate assignment, into Blackboard for points wise. And then when the time opens up, the TK20 will be opened up and you can just upload them there too. So I hope this tutorial was helpful. Again, it's a great opportunity. Let me again give you our Ed Psych librarian. She's awesome to help you. There is a live chat, but it's only until about 5 o'clock, and so some of you are working still at that time. If it's after that, then I would say to email Linda about it. It's Linda, L-I-N-D-A, period, Defato, D-E-F-A-T-O, at asu.edu. And in the subject line, I would just put EDP 510 signature assignment so that it indicates to her, oh, okay, because she works with a lot of students, so that'll just help her acclimate to what your needs are as a graduate student. Thank you for this opportunity to explain this project. I hope you embrace it. It is a lot of fun. Trust me, at the end of the night, part 5, my experience is I have seen students accumulate a wealth of knowledge on topics, and it's really fun to see them know it, share it, and also take in the information from other students. So have a great time with it, and refer to your own instructor for any particular questions or anything they may want to add as very specific to your class. Thank you.